Okay, are you ready? I hope that you're enjoying this series. This is the third week of August, um, and we're going to dive into what actually builds trust. And I think this is super important because a lot of people that think that trust is built on honesty alone, and I don't think that is true. Of course, honesty matters, sure, but honesty by itself just isn't the full story because, a person can tell the truth and still be hard to trust. Right? They can be honest and still be inconsistent. They can be honest and really reactive. They can be honest and still super hard to read. They can be honest and still say one thing while signaling another. And they can be honest and still be emotionally flooded, overexposed. They can be vague, performative, and quite honestly, impossible to get a clear read on. And I think that matters a lot. I know that in different versions, when I know that I'm being honest, but perhaps presenting that honesty with a little bit of vagueness in the efforts of preserving somebody's thoughts, feelings, or emotions, right? Like that can give people a less than clear read on what I'm actually thinking, feeling, or believe on whatever that topic is, right? So this matters a whole lot. And so I just want us to start from a place of trust not being built on truth alone. I think it's built through congruence. I think it's built through consistency, readability, steadiness, through that felt experience that who you are, what you say, how you show up, and what people can expect from you are not constantly in conflict. That's trust. And what I want to widen right away is this is not just about our intimate or romantic relationships, right? Like this is about human contact in our real lives. We're all different. We have different environments, but we need to be thinking about work and how we lead, our involvement with our teams, in our friendships, in our family, in our community, with our clients, with our audiences, in social environments, online, right? In any space where people are constantly deciding whether you feel safe, whether you feel clear, consistent, and real, right? That's where that trust lives. And a lot of people misunderstand that badly, right? They think trust is built because someone is warm or expressive or likable or charming, right? Emotionally open or just willing to tell you a lot about themselves quickly. And excuse me, that's not it, right? They may have the ability to create like great intensity. They may have the ability to create familiarity, to create an illusion of closeness, but it doesn't automatically create trust because trust is not emotional volume, right? Trust is repeated congruence. It's what I say matches what I do. What I signal matches what is true. My tone is not constantly contradicting my words. My yes means yes, my no means no. Meaning you don't have to guess constantly where I really am. You don't have to mind read your way to clarity with me. And that's trustworthiness. And I think a lot of people need that distinction because, well, some people, right, are trying very hard to be good people, honest people, open people, and emotionally aware people. And the experience of them is still hard to trust. And it's not because they're lying, it's because they're hard to read. And that's the part people miss. Some people are not untrustworthy in a moral sense. They're untrustworthy in an experiential sense, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? You can't tell where they really are. You can't tell if they mean what they just said. You can't tell if their tone is matching their words. Maybe you can't tell when something is actually bothering them until it leaks out sideways. That's a big one for me. Is those folks that you just can't get that read. You don't know for sure, is something bothering them until, I don't know, right? Like they get to some level and it leaks out or explodes out the top, right? Like you can't tell the version of them in one room is connected to the version of them in another. And I've experienced that quite a bit also, right? Which one is the more true? Which one do I prefer? That kind of thing. And that's a trust problem. And it doesn't always break trust in a dramatic way. Sometimes it erodes it quietly over time, even years, right? And that's another thing that people don't really get or understand. Is trust does not only break in betrayal, it also weakens in those smaller, repeated inconsistencies, right? Saying yes when you mean no. We've all been let down by that person who says yes to every invite, but cancels 97% of the time, right? That person acting fine. Well, not even the person, right? But you acting like you're fine in one of your relationships when you're building quiet resentment on the inside, right? Being warm in one room and impossible to read in another. Then there's those folks, right? They overpromise and underperform, underdeliver. Then there's those folks, right? They share a lot and still somehow they just never feel fully honest. Right? We've all heard those stories like, I don't know, right? Is that true? Maybe you can relate to this. You call yourself transparent while people still cannot actually tell where you are. Being emotionally available one day and deeply hidden the next, or even managing your image so heavily that truth starts getting filtered on the way out, right? So those are all little things, but not so small. Because trust lives in the repeated experiences people have with you. Can they believe you? Can they read you? Can they trust what you say? Can they trust your pace? Can they trust what you are showing them is not wildly disconnected from what is actually true about you? That's a real question. And I think this is where transparency gets misunderstood a lot too. A lot of people think transparency means saying more. And it doesn't, right? Transparency is not everybody gets access to everything about you, right? Transparency is what I do communicate is honest. What I do show is real. What I say out loud matches what is true. What I signal is not being twisted into some level of performance, image management, or some emotional the theater, right? Like doesn't become some theatrical event, because that's very different from overexposure. And overexposure is not trust either, right? People think like, I've told you everything about me. I'm an open book. It doesn't make you any more trustworthy, right? Some people just tell too much, too quickly, too loosely, and call it honesty. And sometimes it's not trust building at all. Sometimes it's their anxiety. Sometimes it's them seeking relief. Sometimes it's just plain old emotional leakage. And sometimes it's them trying to create closeness faster than the relationship can actually hold. And that's definitely not the same thing as transparency. And well, look, hiding isn't the answer either. And I'm going to be honest, right? Some people do this. They go completely the opposite direction and they stay so composed, so private, so contained, so managed that nobody can actually tell where they are. Sometimes that's not anything more than concealment. So now you have two distortions. You have overexposure and unreadability. And both of those things can damage trust in our relationships. And that's why the real goal is not maximum openness. It is trustworthy readability. Yeah, that phrase matters a lot. Can people feel enough congruence from me to trust what they are getting? Not all of me, not endless access to me, not all of my emotional spillage, right? Enough congruence to trust the reality. That's the work. And I think one of the hardest questions a person can ask themselves is, where might I be harder to trust than I mean to be? Again, not because you're deceptive in some huge intentional way, but because you're inconsistent or too managed, too hidden, too exposed, too vague, too conflict avoidant, too performative, or even too likely to signal what is easiest instead of truest, right? So this is an important question. Where might I be harder to trust than I mean to be? Because people often focus on whether they are honest. And I think they should also focus on whether they are readable, whether their behavior matches their values, their words match their pace, their communication matches their reality, and their relationship constantly require other people to guess. That's where trust gets built or weakened. And again, this is not only a private life conversation. This matters in leadership. A leader who's unreadable costs the room energy. A leader who says yes and then leaks resentment costs the room trust. A leader whose tone changes unpredictably costs the room safety. And a leader who overexposes instead of leading cleanly costs the room steadiness. And if that leader's words and behaviors don't match, right, it costs the room confidence. And that goes the same for friendships, family, team, work with your clients, in your community, when you're online, right? Trust is not a romantic only issue. It's a human contact issue. So if you want to strengthen trust in your life, this is where I would start, right? Where am I hardest to read? Where do I signal one thing while feeling another? Where do I confuse saying more with being more honest? Where do I hide instead of communicate? Where do I overexpose instead of connect? And where do I make people work too hard to know what is real? Those questions aren't comfortable, but they certainly are useful, because trust is not built from your intentions alone. Okay. Trust is built from what people can consistently experience from you. And the more congruent you become, the easier that gets, right? The more your yes means yes, the more your no stays no, the more your tone matches your truth, the more your pace matches your reality, the less your relationships have to run on guessing, mind reading, and interpretation. That's where trust gets stronger. So I want to leave you with this. Okay. Trust is not built because people know everything about you. It's built because what they do know is real. And that's the work. Not saying more for the sake of saying more, not becoming endlessly available, not becoming emotionally exposed as proof of growth, becoming more real, more readable, more congruent, more trustworthy in the places that matter most to you. Okay, so if this has resonated for you, again, this is that public teaching layer inside the Insight and Impact Focus Group. We're always taking the work deeper and further and across total emotional performance. This work is connecting us directly to living in a state of emotional agility, which we learn or build through the Live for Yourself First program and loving your physical body. Because trustworthiness, my friend, is never just verbal. It's emotional, relational, physiological, and lived. I'll see you in the next video.